Hey guys, Kevin Eastman for The Walking Dead Season 6, Episode 4, Here's Not Here, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode because I knew it was going to be Morgan-centric, and that's something that's very important because we have barely seen Morgan. Of course, we've seen him this season, but we haven't really seen his character. He's been a character, but we don't really know, how he found Rick and things like that, and how he got to Terminus and then to Alexandria. And this episode answered all those questions. I thought this episode was amazing. I really loved it. I mean, it really gave us, I think, the necessary character development we needed with Morgan. And Lenny James in this episode truly was amazing, I have to say. He really did an amazing job. John Carroll Lynch as well, the character that we met, Eastman, was also really great in this episode. I'll get into both of those characters, but let's just get in this episode. A lot happened, and it really caught us. I think it caught us up very well. And I'd say this episode wasn't the best episode of the season, but was right up there with JSS. Probably the way I'd rank the episode so far. JSS, Here's Not Here. First time I get thank you, and then the weakest being the season premiere. But let's get into this episode. So Morgan starts talking about how he's talking to, we don't know who he's talking to, but he's talking about how he said he liked talking and he remembered, that this person said they liked talking and they remembered that, and he refers to his first encounter with the wolves, and he says he'll give every last bit to the wolf like he wanted, and then we basically see a flashback of then, and the clear spray paint is on the wall. And I did not see that episode, but they showed really good flashbacks from it. So Morgan's held up in his makeshift fortress. He talks to himself, and he's yelling. He's yelling. He's saying, "You don't clear. It doesn't." I love the way this episode started. You can tell he's really upset. As it says, doesn't matter how many days, how much time. He knocks over a lamp and starts a fire. You were supposed to, he yells, and "Here's Not Here" is written on the wall as a flame builds. You can tell just right away that Morgan is not in the best place, definitely. So Morgan runs through the woods with a protective mask on, beats walkers with the end of an assault rifle. He piles up their bodies in an opening. Night falls, and he burns the bodies. A walker emerges from the woods, heading to the fire. Morgan takes it out. Others approach as well, but Morgan beats them with the gun. One walker bursts from the fire, but meets the same fate as the rest. And the next day, Morgan prepares spikes from sticks around the ashes. A walker with his hand tied together wanders in the woods. Morgan kills it, adding to the pile. I mean, he is just picking off these walkers one by one, and that is something that was awesome. He boils water, pours it in bottles before having a beer, and clear is written on a stone inside of his spike traps. And you can just tell that Morgan at this point is kind of just emotionless. You can tell he's dealing with a lot, but he's just very emotionless. He's kind of just this cold-blooded walker killer, and that's great. So he walks through the woods. He notices he's being followed by two young men, hurries ahead of them. He hides and drives a branch into one's throat, then chokes the other while yelling, "You don't, you know you don't," at him, and that was insane when he did that. I think he just doesn't know. I think it's just he can't really trust anyone. I think that's really what it is. He doesn't think he can trust anyone, and he's basically doing whatever he can to survive, which is a good strategy, but, you gotta let someone live. Another fire burns at night. Morgan stands over it. The next day, he gathers walkers caught on his spikes. He uses blood to mark trees and writes pointless acts, Here's Not Here, and clear. Which that I thought was definitely very interesting, that he wrote that, the way he wrote that. But basically, he wanders the woods, finds a lit up patch with flowers growing. He talks to himself as he grasps a branch in his hand, and basically, he wanders the wood, finds a lit up patch with flowers growing. He talks to himself as he grasps a branch in his hand, saying, "You know what it is." Before unleashing some ninja moves on thin air, he coyers a goat in the distance, carefully steps over some rope with cans tied to it, and Morgan finds a house where a goat is tied to a string. Someone yells to Morgan to step away from the goat. He hasn't figured out how to make cheese yet, which we find out what that has to do with in this episode. Morgan fires him, but the man invites him to put the goat down, have something to eat with him. And you're just thinking, is this going to be the goat that he makes out of cheese? I mean, that was kind of crazy, but Morgan hunts for the man, who reiterates his invitation before threatening Morgan with the last chance. He's hit in the head with a stick, and the man says sorry before knocking him out and locking him in a cell. And the rest of this episode is pretty much this interaction. between this man Eastman and Morgan, which I really like seeing. And like I said, John Carroll Lynch did a great job. I'd honestly really like to see his character again. I don't know if we're gonna see him, but from the looks at the end of this episode, I feel like we're gonna see him again. So Morgan wakes up in a cell with food. He notices a drawing on the wall. The man enters and asks Morgan his name, and Morgan just says, "Kill me." He starts yelling repetitively, and the man tosses Negan a book about peace. That was interesting. The tie-ins to how Negan's going to be there, this book about peace. I don't really know why they introduced Negan, but I don't know if that's connected to Negan, but just the fact that it's called Negan is very interesting. He tells Morgan his name is Eastman, and he says in the other room it's okay. Tabitha, Morgan watches him run outside, dispatch a walker using a tree branch, and Morgan then eats a tomato and talks to himself, and Eastman brings the goat inside, asks Morgan to please not hurt the goat, and this is the first person that Morgan's seen in a while. I mean, ever since he got away from Rick and the group, he hasn't really seen anyone, so he really doesn't know if he can trust this guy or not, and you can tell that Morgan is just like, he's ready to kill him, and basically, Eastman brings the goat out inside. We realize the goat's name is Tabitha, and he asks Morgan to please not hurt the goat, attributing the request to Morgan shooting at him, still not being fed, yet still being fed. And the next day, Morgan watches the man practice using branch as a weapon and put down walkers, and he drags the bodies away 16 hours and 19 on the flow, Morgan says to himself, and I'm assuming that means that's how long he's been on his own. So Eastman prepared as Morgan looks on from the cell. Eastman tries some cheese, but almost throws it up because it's just so bad. It's not good cheese at all. And later, Eastman begins talking to Morgan, telling him he's a forensic psychologist from Atlanta, and he asks Morgan what he does, and Morgan says that he clears walkers and people. And I thought this was interesting what Morgan said. He says, "I clear walkers, people, or anything that gets anywhere near him." And the man asks why, and Morgan says because that's why he's still here. And I think that's true what Morgan is saying. I mean, the only reason Morgan has survived is because he's just killed all these people, and because he hasn't known who to trust, he's just trusted no one and killed them, which is a good strategy. But another good strategy is to have allies, because the more allies you have, the better chance you have of survival, unless you want to end up like Glenn. If you want to end up like Glenn and, trust this guy that you really shouldn't have trusted, then, that could happen to you, but... no mention of Glenn this episode, by the way. No mention of Glenn. I'm sure we're going to get to that probably, next week. I feel like it's going to happen next week. So, Morgan examines the zipper on his gloves. He yanks it off and uses it to pry a board from the wall. But Eastman starts heading back, and he tells Morgan that he has PTSD. And basically... I honestly would agree with that. You can tell that Morgan is clearly hiding his feelings and just not is tackling them very well. Morgan tells Eastman about the too many killed early in the episode, and he tells Eastman that's what he did, that's what he does, that he just kills people. And Eastman asks if he's ever saved anyone, but Morgan calls them pointless acts, and I understand, what he means by pointless acts. These are just, he doesn't feel like saving everyone because it's pointless, and he feels like if he saves them, he has a better chance of getting killed. And I gotta say, his strategy is very good. And Eastman questions Morgan's wedding ring and whether or not he had children. And he tells Morgan he is the way he is because he loved them so much, and... of course, Morgan's children died. He had to put down his wife, if you remember. I mean, it's really hard stuff. But Eastman wants Morgan to get to know him. But Morgan insists he will kill him, and Eastman explains that humans aren't made to kill. That's why PTSD exists, and he insists we all can heal. It's all a circle, and everyone gets a return. And I do see Eastman's point here that, you don't just kill people for no reason. That's not how humans are designed. Humans do irrational things because we have irrational feelings, and that's exactly what's going on with Morgan. And basically, before telling Morgan the cell door is open, offering the opportunity to stay or go, and this is why I love the episode as much as I did, because it was mainly all just about Morgan's PTSD and how he tackles this. And Morgan opens the door, charges Eastman, tosses him onto the couch. Eastman asks Morgan to stop as he pins him onto the ground. Morgan looks for a weapon near the fireplace, and Eastman cuts him off, but Morgan ends up getting Eastman in a chokehold. Eastman flips him over and restrains Morgan on the ground. Morgan raises his hands and defeat. Eastman grabs his stick, notices the drawing fell to the ground and broke, and he reiterates the two choices he gave Morgan, the door or the couch. He can either leave or he can stay on the couch. And Morgan rises up, returns to his cell. Eastman picks up the broken drawing before propping the cell door open, and Morgan's just not ready to come out of the cell yet. He's not ready to do that. So, in the night, Eastman prepares some food. He explains he used Aikido to restrain Morgan, and it's something he used to restrain prisoners. And I don't know if this is going to come back into play, but Aikido, it's not something we've heard of before. I think that's really interesting. So, Morgan says that Eastman's wife and daughter are dead, and Eastman starts talking about a trip that they're going on, but he doesn't know where they'll go, and he hasn't seen them in a while. So, I like what Morgan's telling me. He's telling him, look, you haven't seen them, they're probably dead. I mean, that's true. I mean, this is a world where, it's hard for people to survive on their own, and if he has not seen his wife or children in so long, most likely they're gone. They're probably not alive, they're most likely dead, and I do agree with that. So he shuts the light. Eastman starts talking about a trip they're going on. He shuts the light and says goodnight. And Morgan exits the cell and looks at the drawing. And the next morning, Eastman talks about potential with the food. And he wants to go scavenge supplies for the trip and invites Morgan. But there's no response, so he goes alone because Morgan's not there. So Morgan sits in his cell, picks up the book, which is The Art of Peace, which has a note about Aikido inside, and basically realizes that Aikido means not to kill. Although nearly all creeds have a commandment against taking life, most of them justify killing for one reason or another. And in Aikido, however, they try to completely avoid killing even the most evil person. And I think that was very interesting that we found that, that they try to avoid killing and whatnot there. I just found that all very interesting, definitely. Because some of them, they do try to avoid killing, but it might not be the best strategy. But there are ways to survive without killing. You just gotta figure out a way to do it. And Eastman clearly is a man that hasn't killed anyone and still has survived. So it does work, and Eastman seems like a very capable man that probably is gonna survive, and he's very smart. But the interesting thing about that is, of course, Morgan has killed people. He's also survived. I just find that very interesting, and I'm wondering if that's what Morgan is doing, if he's going to use this Aikido. So Morgan hears walkers outside, knows Tabitha is outside unprotected. He hears the animal under duress and goes outside to save it. A wedding ring around the walker's neck catches his attention, but he's able to kill the pair of walkers. He brings Tabitha in the house before removing the bodies, and after dragging the body a while, Morgan finds a graveyard. And he starts digging for the two walkers that he killed, and those two people are killed. So Eastman arrives, thanks Morgan for saving Tabitha, but before Morgan puts the bodies in the ground, Eastman removes their wallets and IDs to properly mark their headstones, and it's a really sad scene. It definitely, is a sad scene there, and you can tell that Eastman, he's not used to killing these people. He's not used to people dying, and the two arrive back at the house. Eastman tells Morgan that he has to fix the fence around the tomato plant, then shows him he fixed Morgan's spear before giving him his own stick weapon, and we realize that Eastman was Morgan's trainer, and I love these scenes. I love seeing Eastman train Morgan. I mean, obviously, we've seen Morgan use this stick weapon all season, so it was cool to see him be trained by this man. Morgan and Eastman work together around the garden. Eastman teaches him Aikido. He lectures Morgan on believing all life is precious. Morgan receives Aikido creeds with Eastman, and over dinner, Morgan asks Eastman why he has a cell in the cabin. And Eastman tells Morgan he built this place a long time ago, and that is a good question. Why do you have a random prison cell? And basically, he tells him that it didn't have a cell then, and at work he interviewed over 800 men, 25 women, and one man who committed some unspeakable acts, and Eastman claims he was a likable person. He saw right through the man and knew he was psychopath. So he knew that the man knew what he was and wanted and instantly punched Eastman in the face. I mean, that's pretty crazy. He remembers the man's face, his eyes, and his evil, and the man's mask had slipped, and he would kill Eastman right there, and he pulls out a rabbit's foot, speaks of how Aikido saved him, and the man eventually broke out of jail, walked to Eastman's house, killed his wife, daughter, and son, and he built the cell with the intention of bringing the man to it, watching him starve to death. However, he's come to believe that all life is precious. That's why they're eating oatmeal burgers, and Morgan says that he's good at redirecting. He's good at steering people in the right direction. I really do agree. That's really what Eastman does for Morgan. Steers him in the right direction, shows him a lot more possibilities of life, and I definitely really love that, I have to say. Obviously, this man killed, his wife, daughter, and son. He killed Eastman's children, and we know that Eastman believes that his wife, and his children are going to go on some trip just because he doesn't want to face the fact that they're dead, I guess, but I just found that all very interesting, definitely. So Eastman wants to head off the islands to the islands off the coast and at the very least see the beach. They need supplies, and Morgan knows where they can find them. So he leads Eastman to a circular spike trap area and begins going through supplies, and Eastman asks Morgan who he lost, and Morgan tells him that he lost his wife and son. And Eastman asks their names, and of course he says Jenny and Dwayne, and Eastman offers condolences. Eastman says that there are forms right there, right now, and the two stand facing one another. They bow, and Morgan begins going through stance and moves with his stick. Eastman corrects Morgan's postures and dismisses him. It's a really great scene. Like I said, I really like the training between these two. By far, some of the best scenes of the episode was just seeing these two train. I definitely really loved it. So, a walker comes off from the woods. Eastman instructs Morgan to kill him. It's the young man from earlier in the episode. Morgan freezes, and Eastman punches him out the way, but is bitten in the back, and Morgan yells at Eastman for stepping in the way, and insists telling me how it is. Eastman says, let's go home, but Morgan starts to fight with him. The two spar in the trap, and Eastman knocks Morgan to the ground, and Morgan pleads with Eastman to kill him, but he doesn't. He still wants to be killed. He thinks this, he doesn't think he's going to survive, and Eastman loads the walker's body onto his cart, and I just thought this scene was very, very powerful, I have to say, definitely. I mean, just seeing Eastman and Morgan, I was thinking that Morgan was going to kill Eastman. The whole episode, I'm thinking he's going to kill this guy. So, Morgan sharpens weapons in the same place. He goes into the woods hunting and finds Walker wandering around. He kills it, saving two people, a man and a woman, and the woman places a can of food on the ground and a bullet, and she says, thank you. And, of course, that's a bad thing because, of course, Nicholas just said that last week, but she genuinely was happy, and I like that Morgan actually helped these people, and they gave him food. I mean, that's something that is obviously very hard to find. It's hard to find food in this world, and I like that she did that. So Morgan grabs a stick, starts running through the woods. He finds a walker eating Tabitha, then proceeds to Eastman's graveyard. He tells Eastman to sit down and let him dig the grave. Morgan finds a headstone of the man who killed Eastman's family, and Eastman admits to snatching him from his workplace. He put Crichton Dallas Wilton in the cell and let him starve to death. It took 47 days, and then Eastman was gone. He was where Morgan was, and it didn't give him any peace. And this scene is really great. It shows how much these two men are actually very alike. He talks about how Eastman found his peace when he decided to never kill again. Akato is what helped him. He decided, I'm never going to kill again. And he decided to go to Atlanta and turn himself in, which is how he found out that the world ended. That's how he found out the apocalypse happened. And Morgan tells Eastman that the world hasn't ended, and Eastman just calls it progress. And I like that Morgan is saying the world hasn't ended, because it hasn't. I mean, they're still there, surprisingly. They don't know why, but, they're still there. There are still places in the world, even though it's an apocalypse, they're still there. So Eastman just calls it progress, and Eastman explains his daughter's precious drawing to Morgan. Eastman tells Morgan he can stay at Eastman's house and survive for the rest of his life, but he shouldn't. He needs people, and Eastman's ready to go. He has a gun in his lockbox, and he says before going to it, he hands Morgan his rabbit's foot and tells him he hopes it's lucky for him too. Whatever you decide, and Morgan tells him that he's decided. Morgan practices Aikido by himself in the same place he trained with Eastman. He leaves the house with his packing gear and walks through the graveyard on his journey, and he sees the sign, and I thought this was great, and I like what Eastman says. He hopes it's lucky for him. And, you can tell that Eastman wants Morgan to stay. You can tell he doesn't want him to go, because he really doesn't have anyone. That's what's really sad about this scene. I mean, even though Eastman has lived a peaceful life and is trying to move on, you can tell that he is kind of alone. He's actually very alone, and he wants someone in his life, and Morgan is that person. I thought that was very sad that we saw, that we think that Eastman is okay, but you can see that he still needs someone in his life because he lives alone. All the people he cared about died, and Morgan's the first person he's cared about in a very long time, and I really love that. So, Morgan then practices Aikido by himself in the same place he trained with Eastman. He leaves the house with his packing gear, walks through a graveyard, and on his journey he sees a sign for Terminus, and that is everything that we saw up till now. Then, of course, he discovered Terminus, found Rick's book and whatnot, and that's how he found him. And, of course, we know all the other stuff that happened. I thought that was perfect, and that perfectly showed everything we need to see. I love that. So, basically, then we see Morgan finishes telling a story to the wolf, who questions whether Morgan believes it can work. Now, this was very interesting with the wolf, because, of course, we need to know who he was talking to. We realize that he's talking to the wolf, and this is the wolf that we think that Morgan killed. Turns out he didn't kill him, because he kept his promise to Eastman, which that's why this episode is so important, because Eastman, told him you can't kill. And if Morgan wants to move on, he needs to not kill. And this is very interesting, because he finishes telling his story to the wolf, who questions whether Morgan believes it can work out that way with him. And he tells Morgan he's shaking a little and sweating a little before revealing a wound on his side. And he tells Morgan that he was hoping to find medicine to help him, and he's telling him that that he's going to die. However, if he doesn't die, he'll have to kill every person in Alexandria, because those are the rules. That's what the wolves are meant to do. They are there to kill everyone in Alexandria, which would make sense. It is the safe zone, and the wolves clearly don't want it safe for anyone, because it's every man for himself. That's kind of what the wolves believe. That's kind of what I see as the wolves. The wolves just believe it's every man for himself, and that, they shouldn't spare anyone, and they're completely against Cato. And obviously this man is, what's interesting about this wolf is that he seems like he actually wants to do a Cato, like he wants to not kill people. The thing is, though, he clearly is, he clearly is a wolf, and he's not going to go against, the group like that. So he tells Morgan he was hoping to find medicine to help, and he says if he doesn't die, he'll have to kill every person in Alexandria, because those are the rules, including Eastman. He said what happened to Eastman he's going to do to him, and I don't know if Eastman's going to come back in the picture, but I feel like Eastman's in danger now. I feel like now that this wolf knows his story, Morgan's really made a bad decision here. And Morgan leaves the room, locks the door behind him. Rick calls for Morgan. He's screaming, and I don't know if this has to do with Glenn's death or something, but Morgan runs to him, and that's how the episode ends. So, basically, I absolutely love this episode, but the thing is, what did Rick just call Morgan about? I'm not really sure. There could be a number of things. It could be about the wolf attack, but clearly Rick is back in, Alexandria. He made it back there. Now, if everyone else did, like Daryl and, like Daryl and Abraham and Sasha, if they made it back, that's a mystery to us. That's, I don't know if they did. But clearly Rick has made it back to Alexandria, because Morgan's in Alexandria right now. So this is going to get very interesting. Is Morgan going to keep his promise to Eastman? Because obviously that's made him feel a lot better with himself. It's just not killing people. It's made Morgan feel a lot better, and he's promised to, continue doing a Cato. That's what he's promised to doing, and we don't know if he's going to continue doing that, if it's really going to work out for him. He might have to kill this wolf. He just might have to. I mean, if he wants to survive, if he wants a guaranteed survival, he's going to have to kill this wolf. And I really don't want Morgan to die. One, because we've seen him only 6 episodes so far. Like, 6 episodes pretty much. 7, actually. 7 episodes, I'd say. We've seen him for 7 episodes now, and I really don't want Morgan to die. I think that he's a really great character. You really see how great Lenny James is as an actor. He really has this character down perfectly, and I really don't want that to happen. Now, Eastman. Is something bad going to happen to Eastman? I feel like this wolf is going to come after him. I don't know why, but I just feel like the way we're headed, and what the wolf said to Morgan is very interesting. I feel like he definitely is coming after Eastman. However, is Morgan going to try to find a way to maybe steer the wolf in the right direction? I mean, obviously the wolf is saying I'm going to have to kill you, so I'm thinking Morgan's going to probably find a way to get this wolf to just die. But if he dies, then he's going to be a walker, and that's an even bigger problem. So either way, it's a really bad situation for Morgan, and definitely something that I think he's going to have to think a lot about. So we'll have to see what happens with that, because that definitely is going to be very interesting to see what happens there. That's going to be interesting to see what they do with that, and like I said, I really love this episode. I personally think this is probably the best standalone episode that they've done. I think they've done some really good ones, like the one last year with Abraham and Eugene and Rosita. That one was really good. The one with Daryl and Carol last year was really good, but I really feel this was the best one. One, it was 90 minutes, which it needed to be. It told a very coherent story and a very simple story. It really felt like a movie, honestly. This episode really felt like a movie. It felt like a mini movie with Morgan, which I personally really loved. I always love that in these episodes. They always feel, but none of them really felt like a movie. This one honestly felt like a movie, and I think that was awesome. I hope we get more development with this occasion. potato thing. They need to focus more on it. It looks like next week we're back in Alexandria with Jessie, and she's going to be the main focus in next week's episode. Jessie's going to be the main focus, and I like that because Jessie's a really great character, and we haven't gone, I think, enough. I think we've gotten enough with her, but I like that they're going to take mainly the whole episode to focus on Jessie, which is, you know, she's a main character now, so it makes sense why they're doing that. But overall, guys, amazing episode. One of the best episodes by far. Not as good. It definitely is a tie with this and JSS as the best episodes. This truly is an amazing season, guys. Really. We haven't had a single dud. A single dud so far. Last year, we had the Beth-centric episode. I really did not like that episode that much, if you guys remember. You know, I might have said I really liked it then, but I look back, it's not that good of an episode. It really wasn't. And just think of how far the show has come, you know, from a really silly Beth-centric episode to a really deep, impactful episode about Morgan and just his moral code and him having to change everything that he's done. You know, Morgan, the reason Morgan and Rick are so different is because Morgan has now made this promise to Eastman. It's not just a sudden change. It's because Eastman is living this way. He's found a way to survive. Morgan doesn't think he's going to survive, and if, you know, it's worked out for Eastman, it's probably going to work out for him, and I think that's very deep. I love the way they wrote this episode. Such an amazing episode overall. But let me know what you guys thought of this episode. I thought this was definitely one of the best episodes of the season. I will see you guys in my next, which will be for tonight's episode, The Leftovers, which I can't wait for, of course, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.